Well, hello everyone. My name is Ezra Kang, and welcome to Howard University and the Stigma Conference. Now, some of you may be scratching your heads about the title of our program this afternoon. The image of an emerging dandelion seems rather disconnected from a conference on stigma. Now, I have to be honest, I was also scratching my head. My daughter thought the title was also very cool, but she was wondering if her psychologist dad was qualified to talk about a weed. Well, I want to read a poem that made things so clear to me that I couldn't think of a more powerful image than a dandelion to situate our conversation this afternoon. Here, have a listen. A dandelion in the midst of rose bushes would stick out like a sore thumb to ignorant souls. But I know the road this dandelion endured. This weed that all gardeners want to destroy is more appreciated by God than any seemingly beautiful bush of roses. Though that misunderstood dandelion won't for long last, let it be known that God gave it the role of an outcast for divine importance. But as gifts from God to show the world that beauty lies not in the petals of flowers, but in the power of unconditional love and in the strength of the untouched, unhugged, sometimes unloved, but most important of all, unbudged dandelions. That poem, penned by Mary Bowman, a powerful poet, artist, and author born with HIV, describes three extraordinary humans that you will meet this afternoon: Sean Mark, Richard Atkins, and Omar Cintron. They embody the spirit of Mary's unbudged dandelion as long-term survivors of HIV who were told as children that their immune systems work differently from others, and the importance of taking medications to stay healthy even though it made them feel like shit afterwards. Being told that the medicines help train their soldier cells to fight off intruders that attack their bodies, that they were special, but the world can be mean and cold and may think of them differently. Their unexpected adolescence and young adulthood as heterosexual men took different twists and turns, as did the HIV epidemic since the 1990s that all of us know. This afternoon, you're invited to listen in on a conversation about their journeys, where they have been, are now, and where they see themselves going. Their experiences are testimonies that HIV has enduring effects even as it changes and as we work towards a day when we no longer need to convene this conference. Sean, Richard, Omar, welcome.
Yeah.
I know we've done this online and we're Zoom as we prepare for this panel. I'm wondering if we can just start off with a brief introduction. Richard?
Hey everyone, I'm Richard Atkins. I'm an accountant, advocate, and 34-year-old lifetime survivor based here in Washington, D.C. 6 years ago, at the Stigma conference was my first time speaking publicly on a panel. Since then, I've gone on to empower those living with HIV as well as educate providers on best care practices, and I'm happy to be a part of the first ever male dandelion panel.
Omar.
Hi everybody, I'm Omar Cintron. I'm from New York City. I was born HIV positive 36 years. I'm 36, so 36 years old. I was born HIV positive. This is my first Stigma conference here, and I feel very happy to be here with my fellow dandelions, and I'm an advocate, and I've gone, like my effort is to help others living with HIV and how to navigate their life.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Omar. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Sean Mark, longtime survivor, Dandelion, child born of HIV. Anything, everything, I'll answer to it. I was in the advocacy space for a while, worked at a nonprofit in Nashville, also served on the Ryan White Planning Council for a few years, have done things with different entities and different organizations within HIV care. But I did take a couple years off, got married, started a family, all those things that I was always told I wouldn't be able to achieve. So I decided to come back and share the joy, you know, and come back and say thank you guys so much.
Well, really welcome, all three of you. Let's give them another welcoming hand of applause. I'm gonna start us off with a question that perhaps you've been asked quite often, but perhaps don't have an occasion to really reflect on too much. What do you remember about when you were told that you were HIV positive, the infamous disclosure event? Can you talk a little bit about how you were told and what you remember about that day? Anyone can start off.
Yeah, Richard, what was that like?
Sure. So for me, my family didn't discover that I was HIV positive until 1996. Mind you, again, I was born in 1990. My mom at the time was pregnant with my younger sister, and shortly before giving birth, they were doing testing, and that's when it was discovered that my mom was positive, and out of precaution, they wanted everybody else in the family to get tested. So my older sisters, our dads, we were all tested, and one by one, the test came back negative, except for mine. I was the only other person who was positive. I remember almost immediately I was put on medication, and I was asking why. Like, I was told that I was sick, but I felt like I felt the day before. As a 5-year-old, when someone tells you you're sick, you're thinking, okay, I'm coughing, my arm's green, like, I'm in pain, but I felt like I always felt. And as time went on, I kept asking, okay, when will I get better? And eventually, I stopped asking, why am I taking medicine, to what happens if I don't? I wasn't taking it before. What would happen? And it was at that point where I was sat down with a therapist, and they read from a picture book that's explaining that I have this virus living inside my body. It's important you take your medicine every day to prevent the virus from getting stronger. But most importantly, you don't tell anyone, otherwise they may treat you bad or differently. And so I didn't understand it right at that time. It was maybe a few months later, I was staying over a family member's house and fell and scraped my knee. It was a small scrape, barely visible, but once the family member saw, I was rushed to the bathroom, where they kept their distance, so they put on masks and gloves and administered a Band-Aid for a scrape that was barely visible. Their hands were shaking, they were nervous, and that's when, like, the therapist's words really hit home. Like, this is how people view you. And I thought, hey, if this is family, somebody who I know who loves me, what's a stranger going to think? That, like, I have to keep this a secret. I have to do it to not just protect them, but to protect me as well.
I mean, even as we listen to this account, even as adults, even in 2025, we can't get our heads around that explanation of why you need to take medication, even though you look in the mirror and you look fine and you feel fine. And this idea that if other people happen to find out about this condition, they're going to treat you in a certain type of way that makes absolutely no sense to you. But to kind of put that perspective as a 5-year-old, can't even get my head around that. I'm actually wondering whether or not those are things that you also experienced.
Like, for me, it was a little bit different. Because I'm adopted. So I found out both at the same time. So at that time, I was in kindergarten. I was, 5 years old. And at the time, my adopted mom was a little bit chubby. So I asked her, oh, did I come from your stomach? And that's when she took the opportunity to tell me. And she told me, no, you didn't come from my stomach. You was born really sick. You was born HIV positive, and you was adopted. Once you were born, you was left in the hospital, and they just called us up to adopt you. But you was born very, very sick. Like, in the place where I was at, where they took me to at Incarnation's Children's Center, they had like a big picture of me when I was a baby, and they used to call me the miracle child because
This is at ICC?
yeah, because nobody knew if I was gonna survive. So, and then once she told me that, I'm like, okay, because I was 5 years old, so I had nothing internalized. So I'm like, okay, and I went back to what I was doing.
Well, this makes me more comfortable sharing this with you guys. But I was also in foster care. I was adopted. I got adopted at 6. But I was aware that I wasn't with my mother when I moved in with the new family. Like, I think I got there right when I turned 3. And I always had that cough syrup I was taking, and come to find out it was HIV medicine. But at the time, it was just make sure you take your cough syrup, make sure you take your cough syrup until right around the time that I was adopted, I finally cornered my one pediatrician that I had as a 6-year-old, very aggressively. Dr. Sleesman. So shout out to Dr. Sleesman, because he broke it down to a 6-year-old the way that I could relate to it. And at the time, Snoopy was huge in newspapers. And so like I related with that image. So he used to actually draw on the exam table on the paper that's on there. And he would draw little airplanes. And he'd say, you see this airplane? This is a platelet cell. And it's going over and it's trying to get this other plane. And he goes, that's your HIV. And so he broke it down in this way that like my medicine was a way to keep my troops fed and keep them in power got the wheels working. And I'm not even lying, 2 weeks later, I went to go get my blood drawn. I told the person, not even gonna cry. I stopped crying as a kid because I had a more understanding of why this needed to happen.
Right. Right. I mean, all three of you talked about learning about your HIV diagnosis at roughly around the age of 5, and we often wonder when you first, Omar, you were saying that when you were first told it really didn't hit home, it didn't really register,
No, it
right?
didn't.
So I guess I'm wondering, people often talk about what was your second disclosure insight? Like, when did it really hit home that this idea of HIV and not letting other people know about it because they're going to treat you a certain type of way, when did that second insight or that second aha disclosure happen for you, and what was that like?
Well, for me, it was puberty. Yeah. I don't know. As a young child, I was brash. I was bold. I told everybody I adopted my parents. Like, I
you were one of those, huh?
Yeah. I just, woo! And we all have HIV. And they'd be like, shh, shh. And, but it really wasn't until I started dating. And like my first serious relationship, and not fully understanding the dynamics of disclosure and needing to disclose. Knowing that like I wasn't doing anything that could cause transmission, but because I withheld that disclosure to that person, that was a failed relationship. It was my first failed relationship, and became suicidal after that because the first and only experience, and just assuming that that's going to be every time.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Yeah, same thing with me. Like, that's when, the second time, that's when it really hit. It was during, like, dating, like, still to this day, dating is a little bit difficult for me because it's like, you don't know when is it the perfect time to disclose. You don't know if it's if it's the beginning, or you let some time go by, or just don't say anything at all. People have told me, like, don't tell the date on the first date, because like that was like usually that's what I usually have done. Because like if I didn't say it on the first date, like it was like a guilty conscience in the back of my head, like why you didn't say anything, like why, like, you know. So I had to say to the person right there and there. I only tried it with one person. I waited like maybe 2 or 3 dates. Same reaction. Yeah, they were not. They were like, why I took so long to say anything. But I've never tried the not saying nothing like that. I think I will never do, because like guilty conscience in my head.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, you equals you, but still it's like I still have that that guilty conscience in my head, like I've done something bad. So that's how I knew that the stigma was real out there. Like I'm like, okay, like this is, and each time also, like if I heard people talking about it, also how they talk about HIV negatively, it's like that was like internalized in my head. Like, it made me feel bad. Like, okay, like I was born with this illness, but why people are talking so ill about it?
Right.
So, yeah. How about you, Richard?
So for me, right when we found out my diagnosis, there were several major life changes that also happened around the same time. My grandmother had took my older sister and moved to Florida, someone who I looked up to and had like never knew life without. She was now gone. Now I had a baby sister. At the same time, my mom was struggling with addiction. I was taken away from her, placed in foster care. We wound up homeless, losing everything, and all of that was intertwined. Like I couldn't separate anything that was going on from HIV. HIV made me think of homelessness, addiction, and it just caused me to realize by the age of 9, 10 that the world is unsafe. The world is not accepting of any of you. Like this is, I didn't know what I didn't know what human immunodeficiency virus meant at the time, but if you would have asked me what HIV meant, I would have told you harm, instability, and being a villain. And so that translated into adolescence, adulthood, just isolationist, very protective, very, I'm not gonna let anyone get to know me because I don't want you to do harm to me. I just wanna like be normal and live in peace.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'm hearing from all of your stories is that from a very early age, you have learned.
Could you ask everybody to talk louder, including you?
Sure. When Dr. Rana says to speak louder, you must comply. So we are going to speak louder.
Roger.
You got that? We all got that because Dr. Rana said so.
Yeah, okay.
We got you, Dr. Rana.
We got you.
Okay. One of the things that all three of you were, when you were talking about your experiences with disclosure, it kind of reminds me that all three of you bring a very unique perspective because to a large extent, you grew up with the epidemic since its very early days in the 90s. And in some ways, just as you have developed and as you have matured and grown, in essence, so has HIV. The epidemic has evolved. This first Stigma conference perhaps had a very different tone compared to the tone of the Stigma conference today because the epidemic has changed. I'm actually wondering if you can think a little bit about what changes in the epidemic has most affected you as an adult now. If you think about where the epidemic was when you were 5, when you were first told about HIV, and now.
I got a perfect example. I don't know about you guys, but did you ever have the complication of hearing your doctors tell your adopted parents about, oh, he's probably going to die in 2 years? And then those 2 years come, and then it's like, 2 more years? Like, and growing up hearing that, you know, like, I grew up, as a teenager, I didn't think there was going to be a need for me to go to college.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was a need for me to like progress in any sort of field because according to those professional doctors, you know, like, I don't know. And that was very detrimental for me as a kid, you know, like just that one aspect. There's other things. I mean, medicine was hard. The pills back then were just as big as I was almost. Like, and then they would be like, oh yeah, you got to take like 18 of these morning and night, and you know, don't miss any of them. So luckily, like the pills have gotten smaller, stronger, better, right? We have injectables now. But also just, I don't feel like health professionals we have a longer time span. So I don't think that there's that current, hey, well, I don't know, he's not going to be here in 2 more years. Because that one thing, that was really hard as a kid.
Yeah. So the kind of the transition from, let's say, being given a death sentence, if you will, to now living with a chronic condition, that's something that we hear a lot about. But I'm wondering, when you first realize that this is something that you're going to manage rather than something you're perhaps going to die from, how did that shift affect you?
Like with me, the change came from, like I saw the epidemic evolving like with the medications. Because when I was a kid, it was all liquid. And in the 2nd grade, I will never, ever forget there was, I don't know if you guys had this liquid that tasted horrible.
Noravir.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Red bottle, kept it in the fridge. Oh yeah.
Didn't matter if you put orange juice.
Yep. Nope.
Milk.
Yep.
Nothing. It tasted horrible. 2nd grade, I used to go to school late almost every time because it was a fight to take that medication. So at the age of 10, when I was able to take pills, I'm like, okay, great. I don't have to deal with this very nasty medication ever again. But yeah, the medication came back in a pill form a couple of years later. How I knew? Because I was taking the pill and it stood in my mouth for a little bit long. I'm like, oh, it's this medication. Let me just take this real quick. But the medication, you know, evolving, and now to injectables. Like right now, I'm in Cabenuba, going from taking liquids to an injectable is a big.
Kind of, Omar, kind of along that thread, given the changes in medication and the medication burden, do you find yourself being more adherent? Because Dr. Rana is here, and Dr. Rana is giving me an eye to ask about adherence, right? Because that's what Dr. Rana prioritizes.
You know, one thing that he said, I remember reading the description of taste by maker of ritonavir.
Oh yeah.
He said it tastes like cherry-flavored motor oil.
Yes. Yes.
Now, how you would know the taste of it, that's another question, but yes. But does that somehow improve or change your adherence to medication?
Yeah. I always been adherent to medications. Maybe like in my 36 years.
Omar, your provider isn't here, you don't have to lie.
No, maybe.
I'm kidding.
I missed it maybe once or twice, but I always been adherent to my medications. So now with the injectables is more of a thing like don't forget to go to the doctor to take it, to get the injectable every 2 months. So it goes from taking pills every day to taking the injectable every 2 months.
Well, and really, like the pills leading up to where we are now,
Yeah.
which is U equals U,
Yes.
right? Because if the medicine hadn't gotten to this point, U equals U probably wouldn't be
Right.
where it is either. And I think that might be something that you were hinting at, things that have changed. But like I'm married now. I'm married to an HIV negative woman because of U equals U. You know what I mean? Like we're actively preparing to have a family. So a lot of practice goes involved. And, you know, she's still negative. And that's a modern miracle. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like when we were teenagers, that was...
Can you imagine being told that when you were a teenager?
No. I would have laughed at the doctor. I would have been like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Right.
Sell me on something.
Yeah. Richard, what was your...
Yeah, so me and you, Ezra, have done talks before, and it was like the biggest intervention for me wasn't necessarily medicine, but it was camps and support groups that for everything I went to, it causes me to retreat in my bubble, not talk, not interact with nobody, not have any goals, not have any plans. But it was being in support groups with also youth who either acquired HIV or was born with the virus that allowed me to see myself in them. Like providers, they were helpful and they were great, but they didn't know what it was like to go to bed every night with this virus. They weren't there in class when someone says something ignorant about HIV and you have to figure out how to deal with it on your own. But hearing from them, my peers, listening to them have the same fears, the same dreams, the same feeling of trapped from living with the virus, it caused me to like, hey, everything that you think negative about yourself, I don't see that about you. I see you as a talented, funny, smart individual. And then something slowly started to click that if I see that in them, like, do I have that inside me as well? And with camps, I never wanted to go to camp. I was always afraid of someone finding out my status, so I put it off until I was about 17 and like losing my eligibility to go. And it was an awesome experience, and it was the first time in my life that I felt like my HIV status didn't matter. For 17 years, living with it, every interaction, wondering if the person across from you knows you have HIV. What would they think if you have HIV? But for the first time, being away from the environment where I grew up, where everyone was living with the virus, and you weren't judged based on your viral load, you were judged whether or not you were an asshole or not. And like, just being able to take off the armor that you had on for so long, that was changing, and it caused me to want to give back to the younger generation and give them that same experience that I had from that. So I would say that put me on the biggest path to just go from there's no way I can live with this virus to like, hey, it may be possible. Like let me just there's hope again.
Yeah. So one of the big changes over the years is that you're accustomed to living in this very, very safe confine or this very safe bubble that we call the pediatric HIV clinic. And we're used to that, right? We're accustomed to that. We think that that's the norm. We think that that's the way we will be treated once we leave the bubble. But as you transition to young adulthood and adulthood, you realize that that is not going to happen. That adult ID clinic, as great as it may be, it does not replicate what you experience in a pediatric clinic. So that big transition, that's a huge transition that y'all had to kind of navigate. I'm also wondering, since this is since this conference focuses on stigma, one can argue that the way HIV is perceived by communities and by society in 1990 is very different from how HIV is perceived and understood in 2025. In other words, we have come a long way, right? How do you see changes in how stigma has surfaced about HIV over the past 3 decades? Like thinking back when you were 5 and thinking about how HIV is understood and how it's perceived today. How would you describe that change?
Well, I feel like stigma has reduced since that time to now, but it's still prevalent because of people being uneducated, or like they don't want to do their research, or they just stuck on the 1980s mentality. But it has diminished, but it hasn't been eradicated. So we gotta put that in perspective. The stigma has diminished, but it hasn't been eradicated. And the whole goal here is to eradicate stigma. And it's up to people at this point, because like what my provider told me one time, like you can educate people, but you can't change their mind at this point.
Do you think there's a different flavor to stigma? The intensity may have, it's perhaps different, but is it of a different flavor? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Well, because honestly, I mean, people have stigma about Pepsi versus Coke. You know what I mean? I think people are just gonna people, and I don't think that, you know, it. And this might just be me from experience of dealing with the kind of stuff, but honestly, I feel like more people nowadays are open to learning things outside of their wheelhouse, just so that they have it. Like when I met my wife before we were married, she knew about U equals U, but wasn't in any sort of HIV circles, you know, just knew it from news and reading and stuff like that. But then there's to say that, you know, one of the homeless shelters I went at was ran by a heart surgeon, and he forbid me from working in the kitchen, even though I was a trained sous chef, because he didn't want to run the risk of me cutting my finger in the kitchen. And I thought that was so like stigmatic, because he's a heart surgeon. And then after talking with him and advocating through him and trying to share why he was wrong, he pointed out that, like, I'm not wrong. I've only studied the heart. He goes, I was a great heart surgeon because that's what I only cared about. And then that opened my eyes to, you know, well, maybe me sharing this part about me right now, it's not that difficult to do, you know, like to bridge that gap. But I think I agree with Omar. I don't think that the stigma is not to the point where there's like the mobs, you know, busting out people's doors and drag people out in the streets anymore. I think nowadays it's more just, oh, I'd prefer Pepsi over Coke kind of stigma. How do you feel, Richard?
I agree with that. I feel like we've come a long way from HIV being a death sentence, that people are scared to like touch someone living with HIV. Like ignorance, misinformation still happens today. But I do think that we still haven't escaped the stigma of who HIV affects. That it started as a gay-related immune disorder, and a lot of people still view that as something that only happens with MSM or black and brown folks or people who inject drugs. Like the idea that someone could be born with HIV and be here healthy is like something that stigma and misinformation wouldn't even allow them to like
and
wrap
heterosexual.
and heterosexual wouldn't allow them to like wrap their heads around. So I would say with stigma is it's like people who are interested in information understand and they know that like it's not the same, but just so many people's like, okay, that's not my problem. It's nothing I have to worry about until it's too late, until they possibly contract the virus.
Yeah. You know, I was talking to a young person who, a young adult who was born with HIV, and I was asking him the same question. He said something really interesting, and I wanted to see what you thought about this response. He said, yes, stigma might have diminished over the years, but sometimes that shit just sticks with you. In other words, it doesn't really matter if I disclose my HIV status to everyone in this room, and no one is going to hate on me, but for some reason, I'm still going to hate on myself. This idea that you have somehow internalized it, and you basically believe the lie, right? I mean, in research, we call this internalized stigma. That's something that sticks with you regardless of how progressive society has become in terms of viewing with HIV. What do y'all think about that? Is that something that...
I agree with it personally. So I think I shared with y'all just recently off stage, but I'm celebrating 6 years alcohol-free because, well, I like to party still. You know, you guys that drink, keep going. But for me, the internalized stigma became alcoholism because I just didn't want to deal with myself. I didn't want to deal with what other people. And it wasn't that I was going out and getting their feedback and then drinking myself into a stupor because of their feedback. It was my perceived feedback that they would give. You know, it just, oh, well, I'm just not worth it. I'm, you know, oh, da-da-da-da. And then next thing I know, I was a raging alcoholic for a long time.
Right.
But thankfully, God's there, and God, you know, provides an escape from that. And so whereas I'm not necessarily dealing with that particular stigma. You know, my wife's family, my extended family, even the family, my biological family that I ended up meeting later, still very stigmatic, you know, like, because they just don't know. They don't know about the HIV. And honestly, these days, I do a lot of talking for work. So, you know, it's only so much more talking I'm going to do. You know, I'll talk to those guys at some point. But to know that that's your own family, and it's, you know, you have to take care of that too. But
for me, one of the eye-opening experience that made me realize things were changing was I was a camp counselor at camp, and there were, at the time, they've been mostly for children who were born with HIV, but as medication and babies stopped being born, it became more teens who required HIV. And there was one young man who he just found out he had HIV 2 months ago, and he was like here laughing, enjoying himself. And it was like, his view was, I just have to take a pill and I'm healthy.
Right.
Whereas some of the people who lived with it for 10, 11 years at the time when it was a death sentence, where we didn't know, where there were so many unknowns, they were trapped in that fear that they developed when they were younger, unable to escape. And I can say that I felt the same, that I know things aren't different even still today, that what I went through with back in the 90s, but I just feel like it doesn't go away. Like I have to learn how to silence that voice, but it's constantly being there. Like it's my best friend, the voice in the back of my head, like, hey, remember all the shit you went through?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And those are voices that only you hear.
Yes.
So when people around you don't really understand, saying, this is 2025, no one's really hating on people living with HIV anymore, but you're still playing these tapes that echo pervasively, right? That you can't shut out.
Yeah, same thing with me. Like I said before, is that internalizing stigma is like the little conscious in the back of your head. So like that internalizing stigma comes to me only usually if I'm trying to pursue a relationship and I don't say anything.
Right.
That's when I experience the. Other than that, not so much.
Yeah.
But it's in the back of your head. There might be days that I might feel down and be like, oh yeah, I'm not worth anything. I'm this, I'm that. But the real internalizing stigma only, like for me, only comes like when it comes to like dating, and if I don't mention anything.
You know, speaking of relationships, I mean, all three of you mentioned that the first time you realized that you're living, what it means to live with this virus is when you started dating. as you know, as you enter the precarious stage of puberty. But I'm wondering, how do you navigate that now? Relationships.
I'll let you guys start.
So for me, when I became of dating age, it was like, absolutely not. I'd rather die. It was in the back of my mind, why would anybody choose to date someone living with HIV? That there are millions, billions of people out here who don't have HIV. Why would anybody pick one of them over someone else? I thought that I had to overcompensate for HIV, that I had to be kinder, more funnier, smarter, more intelligent, all these things, and prove myself so much that maybe I would find someone who could overlook my HIV status. And that didn't work. It just ruined, self-sabotage relationships before they even began, just out of fear. And it wasn't really until that I got comfortable with loving myself and who I am and not needing someone else to accept me that I was free. And then suddenly I'm attracting potential partners, and it was just from them getting to see the positive qualities that I have. That's when really things made a difference. My first partner, I disclosed to her right before we were about to be intimate and have sex, and her first thought, or the first thing that she said when I told her that I was HIV positive, it was, "How did you get it?" And I didn't mention that I was born with it, just, "Hey, I'm living with HIV." And later on, we had a conversation, and I was like, would it have mattered if how I got HIV? And she said, yeah, because if you were promiscuous with a lot of partners, or if you were using drugs, then I would need to know for sure that you weren't doing those behaviors. Otherwise, I couldn't be with you. And that just stuck with me. That relationship didn't work out. Maybe that was one of the reasons why. But yeah, I just find that instead of, I know some people like to disclose right away, but I just feel like if you are just presenting HIV to a person, they may not be receptive, but if they see the individual behind it, they see you, they hear you, they're connected. I recently, a couple months ago, just got out of a 6-year relationship. So if you ask me in a year from now, how's dating been, I might have a different answer. It's terrible.
At the same time next year here in this auditorium.
Right.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
For me, relationship, it was always in that mentality, I only had to date HIV positive people. I've heard that so many times. People will be like, oh, why you just don't date somebody who's HIV positive like that? You just don't have to go through that hurdle. That's already a thing that's established. But little do they know, there's different types of HIV, there's different strands. So you cannot just be in a relationship with somebody who's HIV positive unless you really know that the person that you're dating is undetectable and they are adhering to their medications. Other than that, I would look in other avenues, different people.
Right. So in some ways, the lingering effects of stigma is still hovering over you in the context of relationships.
Yes.
You can't shake it.
Yeah.
I found a wife. It took me a long time. It took me a real long time. But dating was rough. I remember dealing with a lot of the similar aspects that you guys just mentioned. I remember even talking to a psychiatrist of mine who also recommended me date other people with HIV, and I'm like, that's how you get more HIV, and I'm not trying to get more, I'm trying to get better, and I was like, nothing against other people with HIV, you know, but I don't think that's the. I turned to internet dating. I would not recommend it. There's a lot of weird things in there, but it allowed the conversation to start, you know, and that allowed me to be able to broach the subject before there was any sort of intimacy or, you know, before we even met, just so I could weed it out and say, you know, is this going to be worth my time, or is this going to be another experience where, you know, hey, we've invested these first 2-3 dates. I really like you. I need to tell you this about myself. And then that person just being like, oh, well, we're done. You know, and then just feeling like that's all that effort, all that energy just wasted, you know. But like I said, I'm very, very grateful, very happy. You know, and marriage isn't just a solution. You know, it comes with its own issues. Like stepchildren, I went from a complete bachelor to now I have a 16, a 17, and the oldest one turns 24 in 2 weeks.
Dang.
Wow.
Yeah, and then like our middle child is actually trans, so I get to take place with him too on his journey, you know, and try to be that mentor and be, you know, even though we don't walk in the same footsteps, this is a very similar path, and I can show you how to navigate. So, you know, like it's not what I think everybody envisions marrying a supermodel, and you know, but for what my marriage is, it's perfect for what I need, you know, and I'm very thankful for that. So one day it'll happen for you guys too.
Now, I appreciate the three of you talking about such a kind of like a personal topic in such a public space. Before kind of going on with some of the other questions, I want to invite the audience to join our conversation. I'm actually wondering if there are any questions or comments or even observations. Of course, Dr. Rana. But before Dr. Rana asks the question, I'm actually wondering whether or not there are.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh.
But I don't have to be the first one.
Okay. But I'm wondering whether or not there are any comments or questions or observations. Yes. Will you wait for the mic?
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So when it comes to disclosure in relationships, have you tried talking to a potential partner about the science behind it before disclosing your status?
So for me, not before, but afterwards. In fact, I was just having this conversation yesterday that about like after you disclose to someone, it almost becomes reverse. Like you have to be there to counsel them as they process the news they take. It was like, hey, I can give you my information, my facts, but just don't take my word. Here are some reputable sites you can look up to. With one partner, I gave them a copy of my labs and allowed them to take it to their doctor so that someone they trust can explain what these numbers meant. Another one, I invited them to an appointment with me, and they met with my doctor, and the doctor explained and walked us through it. But yeah, definitely give them that information at another source so they're not just think that you're trying to tell them something to get in their pants, but also like just you got to give them space, and it's whether or not that's a day, 2 days, but just they like how you've been living with this for years and have come to terms with it. Like it's that person has to then make a decision whether or not they want a relationship or interaction with someone who's positive, and whether or not they are or not, that's not reflective on you or your well-being in this world.
Like for me, I had one partner, I told her beforehand, and I try to educate her on PrEP. So she thought that I had to take the PrEP. And once she found out that it was not for me, that was for her, she was not with it. Like, she even refused to come with me to a doctor's appointment, because she was worried about the side effects of the PrEP pill. So like that was her main issue. But usually when it comes like talking about the science behind it, it's like what Richard said, it usually comes after the disclosure.
Well, when I disclosed to my now wife, I did mention that to her on the internet, and then before we even met up in person, she had already went to her doctor and started PrEP, which she didn't disclose to me until the first time we were intimate. Oh. So then finding out that, oh wow, like, you know, I'd already told her the U equals U, and you know, she'd seen the PrEP commercials, and so she just went out and started taking it. She was a kidney donor, so ultimately she ended up having to stop taking it because I think the only one for cis females is really can have some kidney side effects. But then, you know, U equals U takes over for that. So we were very, very happy. But I love that the PrEP is everywhere. You know, I love that the commercials are out there. I do wish that there were some more varieties.
Great. Thank you for that question. Other questions or any comments? Yes. Right there.
Thank you. First off, thank you, Sean, Omer, and Richard, for sharing such personal experiences with us, for trusting us, and just for your openness. Your voices are powerful, take courage, and I think they're transforming how we understand stigma. So I just wanted to say that. My question would be, in this room, there's healthcare providers, educators, community advocates, and I just wanted to know, growing up, you know, what's one thing that you wish the adults in your life had gotten right when it came to navigating, you know, your HIV status, and what is something that we could keep in mind, you know, and do better so that this doesn't happen again and again?
Good question.
For me, it was how it was disclosed to you. The first part about explaining the virus, that was good, but the part about don't tell anyone, otherwise they may treat you bad or differently. I think saying that, hey, there are spaces where it's okay to talk about and spaces where they're not okay to talk about. But also like involving the rest of the family in your HIV care, that for the longest my aunts, uncles, extended family knew, and I wondered if they knew, but they never like talked about it or were willing to have a conversation with me about it. So it was like, if they're not showing that it's safe for me to talk about it, then I can't. And there was just so much that I lived trapped with inside that I think that if I would have had someone there to say like, hey, how are you feeling today? How's this medication? What is it? What are your thoughts? Like, what are your hopes and dreams? Just things that I was thinking inside, but just kind of waiting for an adult to take the lead on and make it more comfortable for me.
For me, I think the thing when I was younger, I feel like the adults would have gotten right was to tell us that we're going to live a long, healthy life despite this illness. Because they kept on saying, oh, you got 2 years to live, or you got a year to live, you got 6 months to live. Like if they would have said, you're going to defy the odds, you're going to live long, like, I think that would have made it a little bit better. And to change, like for us, for people here to like learn, just know that HIV is not a death sentence anymore. it, like you live a long, healthy life and educate yourself. I think that's the main point, educate yourself. If you don't know something, fine, look, try to do research on it. Just don't go by what you hear outside or what you hear from other people.
I would definitely echo both Richard and Omar. Being mindful that this is a child and the child's mentality. Like as a kid, all you want to do is grow up to become this, grow up to become that. We wanted to grow up, and I think that keeping that in mind, especially the children that you see our parents coming with us, and you see how the behavior is in the offices, but you don't see necessarily how the behavior is outside of the office. What I've noticed that my parents could put on a brave face for an hour and a half, and then when they go home at the dinner table, still be so lost in what did the doctor say, how much is the dosage, how is this and this and this, but in the environment, in the situation, being too scared to actually speak up and ask for more clear directions. So just being able to, dealing with the child, but advocate for the child too, you know what I mean? And about, sorry, remind me one more time about about keeping it in, right? Not sharing with anybody. Actually, if I could take a quick second, if you guys are okay with it, I have a clip, I have the AV team prepare, and this is my response to people telling me not to tell anybody. So whenever we can get that rolling, but I can keep talking till then. Oh, there we go. So I'm not sure if we have audio for this at the moment, but, well, that was a clip from a reality TV show that I was on 3 years ago. And they beautifully pieced all these things together. The whole premise of the TV show is finding lost biological family members. So as a foster care child, I was right in there, right? I also used this platform and this opportunity to talk about being born of HIV. Not in the way that I was ousting any family members that may have it, but in a way that I know that that's just not talked about. And I wanted to share that experience. I ended up being able to be on for the whole season, because I know you guys know how reality TV can be, very competitive. I made sure to keep that story alive so that people understood. And I like to joke about this. BYU bankrolled the whole thing, right? So the Mormons. So I tell people I'm Utah famous. But the real key point that I wanted to share my story with their audience was that HIV is still highly stigmatized in the Mormon church. I know you've heard stories about teenagers being kicked out of their homes and living homeless in Salt Lake City. A good majority of those children could potentially have HIV also. It's just not something that collectively that they accept. So this was also just a way for me to share advocacy to a population that has been hard to reach for advocacy.
Right. If someone wanted to watch this clip, what would they search on? What would they search? What would the search terms be if you don't have the website?
You would search relative race, and you could search Sean Mark. You should be able just to Google it and be able to pull up some stuff.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions before I kind of wrap up with one last closing question? One of the things that all three of you talked about was this idea of how do you navigate relationships. But I'm really curious, given that we're at a conference right now, all three of you have been really active in HIV advocacy in different capacities. What has been your experience navigating HIV spaces as a heterosexual male? Because in many ways, that's not often what folks associate with HIV, right? People often say that HIV doesn't discriminate, the virus doesn't discriminate, but folks do. And so there's this idea that kind of an anomaly. So I'm wondering if you can just kind of give us some closing thoughts on what your experiences have been like navigating HIV spaces, specifically in your respective advocacy roles.
Well, for me, navigating It's been okay. Thank goodness that I was pointed to the right path, connected to the right people, that now I'm part of the Lifetime Survivor Network, and they welcomed me with open arms. Last year, I attended the first USCHA conference in New Orleans, and it's like when I met them, it was like I knew them for years on end. It's like a family that I've never that I didn't have never met. So I've been connected with them. So like if it wasn't for them, I think I still would have been looking to see how to connect as a male, because like what you said, usually HIV, it's not really, it's not seen very, with male. So being in this group has helped a lot and has opened many doorways for me.
So pre-2023, I would describe my experience navigating HIV spaces as being ostracized from an ostracized community. Didn't think anything was intentional, but go to conferences, both international and US based, and I would look at the agenda and I would see nothing that addresses my identity as a heterosexual male or as a person born with HIV. And it made me wonder, did I belong in these spaces? That are they welcoming? I know that like so many of my women Dandelions and Lifetime Survivors counterparts, that they had peer networks like the Positive Women's Network or the Well Project or the Women's Collective to like grow up in. And I felt like as a male, like after we turned 18 and left pediatrics care, it was like trying to find a support group, and everything would say support group for gay and bisexual men. And it's like, okay, can I attend even though I don't identify as that? And so it just caused me to like wonder, is there even a place for me to be an advocate in this world? 2023, I was speaking at the US Conference on HIV and AIDS, and I was speaking on a panel for heterosexual men, and I was prepared to give usual talk about how we're not represented or anything, but unbeknownst to me, that a group of Dandelions took the stage and introduced themselves to their world as a forgotten population that's here living with HIV. And like right before my talk, I met one of them, and it caused me to break down in tears. Just one, that like someone's finally seeing us, hearing us, recognizing us, and two, that like the term Dandelions was coined after Mary Bowman, who's a tremendous advocate, but just someone that I called a friend for so many years. Someone who I grew up with, someone who inspired me to just carry on a little bit of what her legacy meant. And so I would say now that like these spaces, to hear from multiple Dandelions on one panel, like they're great and I cherish them, but they're not really reality, that we're still like an isolated unit. Yes, we have the like Lifetime Survivors Network, but that's like virtual. Like there's not really local like meetup groups dedicated to that. Like we're adults with busy lives, children, jobs, and it's like hard to get together and meet. So in like HIV spaces, it's still like I'm the only one of like my lived experience, but just continue to speak up because people say, hey, I know someone who was born HIV positive, or this is a heterosexual male. Can you speak to them and talk about like...
So Richard, why do you decide to continue speaking, even though there are times when you feel like you want to remain silent?
It's for the people who don't have a voice, for the people who... Thank you. Like, for those that I know that would never get up on the stage and share their experience with the rest of the world, that for me, I was that kid.
Yeah.
I never considered doing this, but if nobody else is going to speak for us, like, let me be that one of the voices who does.
I'm going to put Richard on the spot a little bit. I mean, when we were preparing for the panel here, Patty was asking, can we identify folks that might want to serve on a panel? And you know how you always have the same usual suspects, like the same people who always sits on these panels? And so then when Richard was approached, I kind of sensed that Richard, forgive me if I misinterpreted, but kind of sounds like Richard says, okay, not again. Like, okay, like if you really need someone to sit on a panel, all right, I got you, right? There was sort of this reluctance, but it's more than just reluctance. It was a sense of fatigue and exhaustion, right? But yet you're here.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes. That speaks volumes for both of you as well, all three of you. So really, I know you get invited to speak on a lot of these panels, and you do get exhausted. You don't. The last thing you want to be is you want to become the poster child for this, that, and the third. But yet you still speak for that very reason that you stated. So respect for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others, in terms of just experiences navigating HIV spaces for you.
The only real issues I had was when working in HIV healthcare.
Yeah.
I was very aware that there's not really any grants or funding towards heterosexual males, and that's something I would love to see something reworked, because I agree. If there was funding available, in-person meetups, that could easily be a thing, because you see that at other outreach agencies. These conferences, I think it really just is the flow of money, and I think once people start hearing more collective voices from these, underutilized groups, that I think maybe the money will start coming, and then maybe we can start having larger, more powerful impact. But I don't know. But as far as like me doing it, it's just like for the TV show, just like what Richard said, like I grew up in a time and day, and actually I do this because one of my childhood friends, who was also in foster care, he was born with the AIDS diagnosis, and I was born of HIV too, which my adopted mother always put it, at least you weren't as bad off as Cain, which like really stunk. I didn't like the way that she talked about my best friend. He passed away of a heart attack about 3 years ago. He was you equals you. He was totally fine. He ended up getting a severed bone in his leg, and that caused a clot heart attack. So from then on, I'm just like, now I have lost friends. Up to that point, it's like, acquaintances that have passed away, at least from me, other people in like the health department and stuff like that. But that was my first actual friendship that I had with somebody who passed away living with HIV. So I agreed to come do this year because, I selfishly took some time off to work on being married and raising a family. And but then somebody, Derek Robinson, a good friend of mine who I know has been at previous conferences, he reached out and said, hey, I think now's the time. Yeah. And so, just to be here for those who can't.
I don't know Mary Bowman the way all three of you know her intimately. And circling back to the title of this discussion about emerging dandelions and how she described dandelions as being unbudged. I love that term because I think all three of you and what you shared with us this afternoon really embodies that. And I have a greater appreciation for that metaphor of dandelion because of the stories that all three of you shared. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ron, do you have any closing remarks? I know I'm putting you on the spot because you're always a good closure on these things.
No, I thought that was fantastic. I think I have a question, but I don't know if you can already answer, because you see, I'm a dandelion of my own, because I have a hearing deficit. So, and no hearing aid can overcome hearing deficit. And if you read Goffman's book on Stigma, the original book, he did work on communities with hearing deficits, and it's part of his book. So important work. But anyway, see, we don't take, like, glasses are not stigmatized because most people end up wearing glasses, but hearing is still, people make fun of it. You know, it's like, you know, listen up, or you do something. You know, it's your fault. You know, so anyway, my question really dealt with, and you guys, when I could hear you, spoke so beautifully. It was such lovely and very intimate conversation, and as I asked, beautiful question. But when are you able to challenge? When did you find yourself ready to challenge stigma in public settings? Not necessarily on stage, but you know, in a group, or you know, where people are making fun of different stigmatized conditions. When were you able to find enough in yourself to challenge that?
Okay, so when did we first stand up and say that's not right, right? Yeah. Like when we were like, okay, that enough is enough. Yeah. Honestly, you guys are gonna love this. It was at a Pride Day festival back in Nashville. I got in line behind some beautiful ladies with some large, loud those fans, and they go whack, 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 whack. And I said, all right, I'm gonna learn something. And I got up with them, and I saw how they interacted with people, just you know, right in your face. They didn't care if you were there, like, you know, like they didn't care if you were opposed to them. They were just like, you know what, this is the truth. These are the facts. You can get them or you can get out of the way. And I was like, I can use that. Let's do that. You know, like, that's how I took it. But how did you guys?
So for me, I never saw myself possibly speaking out. I was always an introvert. I was a kid who grew up with a stutter, another stigmatizing condition. I didn't have a voice, both literally and figuratively. And so it was just seeing the experience in my first International AIDS Conference, learning so much about HIV on a global scale, about how U.S. ranks number 9th in the world in most people living with HIV, but from the conference, the U.S. was seen as more of a provider of funds to other countries and rather a country struggling with the epidemic itself. And just noticed that, like, the lack of just representation or mention of, the only time mother to child, people born with HIV were mentioned was that in the context of mother to child transmission has almost been eliminated. And so just after searching so long for that one person to look up to and be a voice and mentor for me, it's just like, hey, that person might never come, but you can be that for someone else. And yeah, I was reluctant, but I'm happy that the offer was extended to be a part of this panel, because I think it's important for the conversation to just not lift up other dandelions, but how we fit into the HIV community as a whole and help everyone. Like, stigma won't end if it just ends for us. It has to end for everybody.
I agree with what Richard was saying. Yeah, like with me, I'm an introvert still this day. I haven't like really like publicly like challenged somebody else with, you know, like had like talk negatively. I always was that person like in the class, like when they spoke about HIV, like I'm like in my head, like, do not pick me, do not pick me, do not pick me, because if I open my mouth, it will be the dead giveaway. So, but I haven't encountered that like yet. I haven't. But if it were to come, it depends on the setting, depends on where and who it is. So, like, that's how I would navigate through it.
That's beautiful. Just a final comment. and this relates to your question that we have many more drugs and picture of HIV has changed. But in talking to the people I've taken care of over a long period of time and listening to people, it's very much like racism against, it's, you know, if you're 40% of your nation can vote for whoever they voted for to bring them, make him president, you know, who represents all of that, what you and I don't agree with. There is so much racism. Just people have become sophisticated in hiding it under the right circumstances. And every time, you know, when the lid is open, it comes out. Same thing with stigma against HIV, unless you challenge it. And you know, there isn't always the right circumstance to challenge it because people are not open to listening to you.
Yep.
But saying your piece, you know, I can say I go to mosque regularly, but if my imam says something about transgender or gay community or any other community, and he's one of the sweetest guy, but he's sure to hear from me. That I take it upon myself to challenge that, look, what you said was not correct, that it bothered me greatly. So until we challenge, that's why it was so, that for all of us to challenge it, but learn to challenge it the right way. Say, have you read this or have you read this? Or do you know the latest facts? You know, in a way where we don't turn off other people. I think until we challenge it, I think we are letting the stigma persist. So I think it's so crucial for all of us leaving here that we stand up. You know, and silence is complicit.
Right.
It's agreeing with the people.
Right.
Yep.
So in many ways, Dr. Ron, that's why we have this conference, right? This is an ongoing
But the
conference.
conference is small.
Right.
I think
Right.
we have a duty to go out. And
Sure. Great.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ron. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.